Working 18-hour days, I slipped and I fell. Winter's up and hit me, I had to change well. There's no way to sustain it, you'll crash and burn. Will not be able to work and no way to earn. Change well, and then you can leave. Change well, and your kids you can feed. Turn your life around for the final bell. It's now or never, you have to change well. It's now or never, you must change well.
Hello, this is Don Greer from Wellness Leadership LLC. Our podcast is a 15-minute podcast with tricks and tips on wellness. It's called Change Well. And today we have a very special podcast. It's honoring our veterans, and one veteran in particular. Both our founders at Wellness Leadership LLC are proud veterans of the Army. I was in military intelligence, and my wife Colette, who's both CEO of the company and my life, was an Army nurse. We met at Fort Huachuca and been going strong since. But I learned a lot of lessons from the Army, particularly on wellness. But I gotta say, and still beat Navy, but some of the tricks I learned the most from was from a Navy captain. This Navy captain was a guy named Captain Barber, and he was one of the greatest influences of my life. Captain Barber taught me lessons that I follow today in wellness as I strive to live a healthy life. These lessons on fairness, honest business dealings, and how to live a healthy life I honor and try to follow each day. First, a little background. Captain John Ronald Barber was born in 1891 in the town of Fairmont, Minnesota, and died in 1980 in the town of Crosswicks, New Jersey. He was a captain in the Navy where he served as a dental surgeon. Now, I met Mr. Barber back when I was 11 years old after reading a local advertisement in the paper. He wanted somebody to maintain his gardens. I wanted a 10-speed bike from Sears. Man, I miss Sears. You could buy anything in Sears. So I ran out and went to Mr. Barber's house to get this job. Now, I walked up to the door of his house, and his doorbell was different. You had to crank the doorbell. More about that later. At the time, Captain Barber was approaching 80 years old, but he was still the epitome of the health. I asked him about the ad, and we settled on a contractual arrangement. And I can still remember the words from Captain Barber to this day. He said, and I'm going to do the best Captain Barber. I'm sorry if it sounds like Yoda. I will pay you a penny a minute. A penny a minute, I say. You should pay me a penny a minute for all the lessons you will learn. Little did I know at the time how true those words were. The next day, I started a 2+ years working relationship with Captain Barber. Here are the lessons I learned from this great, great man. First, how to stay healthy. Captain Barber was an organic farmer before it was cool. And he also was a homeopathic practitioner. He lived to 88 years and was still trimming trees in his 80s. Okay, this guy was very, very healthy. 88 back in the day when I was young was a good ripe age. When I started on my weight loss journey and I lost 170 pounds, I remember a lot of the lessons from Captain Barber about how to stay healthy. Here are 4 of them. First, a varied vegetarian lifestyle is a critical component of health and maintaining your weight. Captain Barber grew all kinds of vegetables in his garden. They were the normal vegetables you usually have: corn, tomatoes, onions, but he also had some things that were not so ordinary, like asparagus, rutabagas. I never even heard of rutabaga until I met him. Grapes, and believe it or not, castor beans. We'll get more to that in a moment. He ate many of these things on a daily basis, or almost every day. And the first time I ever ate asparagus, which became a staple in my weight loss journey, was at Captain Barber's table one time when he invited me to lunch. Second, Captain Barber was an organic farmer way before it was cool. Now, one of my jobs was to turn the compost pile. He had an old style compost pile full of, he made it with a bunch of logs. You had to climb up in the compost pile. You're like, hey, heck, I should just build a compost pile now because you could lose weight turning and climbing up into the compost pile. And you would turn the compost, and that's what you put on his garden. He had no chemicals. Also, in taking out the weeds, we had no kind of pesticide or anything to get rid of the weeds. I had to get down on my hands and knees and weed the garden. Now, sometimes it got me worried because I don't know if you ever done it yourself, but like sometimes the baby strawberries look like weeds. So I was always like scared to death that I was going to pull out strawberries. The third thing I learned from him about staying healthy was to be active. Be active even when you're older. Now I'm not up to Captain Barber's age right now, but I'm getting up there. And he used to go out there with me on a daily basis and work the garden. I just didn't do it alone. More on that later. I also my brother was also hired by him. I still remember him climbing up in the trees like when he was 70, early 80s, and trimming them. This guy was amazing. The last thing is homeopathic medicine. Back to the castor beans. Mr. Barber grew castor beans and other things that make essential oils. And he would take castor oil on a daily basis. Castor oil helps your digestion and has many other benefits if you have one spoonful of it. You've got to go look at the ads. I know there are some problems with taking too much castor oil, but he had this homeopathic medicine way before you could make a lot of money off it, right? So that's all the 4 things about health. Now, second, he told me about doing fair business dealings. Now, Captain Barber paid us 60 cents an hour, a penny a minute, he said, right? Now, that was good wages back then. It wasn't minimum wage, but it wasn't that bad, right? And we would have to settle the invoice each day. Now, he was fair, but he was also kept to his, he expected you to keep to your word. Now, I always did. But my brother Gary one day decided instead of putting 60 cents, he would put 90 cents. And here's the dialogue that happened with Captain Barber and him. My brother Gary went to Captain Barber, and Captain Barber said, this invoice doesn't look that well. It doesn't look right. And my brother said, Miss Captain Barber, I need a raise. Now, Captain Barber, feigning hearing loss, said, a blaze? Yes, son, the sun was a-blazing out there. It was very hot. And then my brother Gary goes, no, Captain Barber, I want a raise. And then Captain Barber, again feigning hearing loss, said, praise? Oh, yes, son, you did pretty well out there. I seen you. You weeded the strawberries very good. He said, no, Captain Barber, I want a raise. A raise. And then Captain Barber said, a raise? Yes, a raise. And Captain Barber said, no, you can't have one. We settled on the contract for a penny a minute, and that's what I pay. Captain Barber made a fair deal, but you could never pull the wool over his eyes. 3, do it the easy way. Now, Captain Barber was always driving me to excellence. He would look at the way I was doing things, and he would suggest, in a kind way, how to do it better. So one time he would show me how to rake the leaves. And he showed me to change my hand up and I could be more efficient. Now, I followed it pretty well to the letter, but I changed it up a little bit from what Captain Barber had said. Now, the thing that was very interesting about this is Captain Barber was looking at me and he said, And then he got the rake and modified his approach a little bit, adapting some of my technique that used his technique too and expounded on it. Unlike other more senior, he was willing to learn and teach even at 80. On wellness, teach what you know, but learn so you can grow. A fourth point about Captain Barber and what I learned. When it rains, take care of the troops. I was hired to help Captain Barber with his garden, but sometimes it would rain. And instead of sending me home and me whining about I wouldn't be able to pay for my bike, he would find something that I could help him out with. And one of the things was to polish his spoons. And so I learned how to polish spoons and also how to make Navy knots from Captain Barber when it rained. Now, it really helped me once I got to West Point. Okay? I may never had the shiniest shoes, but I got to tell you right now, I never got a demerit for my brass. I learned how to polish brass from Captain Barber, a Navy captain, and it helped me out. And that's the thing. Pay it forward. Once you achieve wellness or you have something that you can share, pay it forward. And that's what Captain Barber did on a daily basis. Point 5, share your life. Now, one of the greatest times I've ever had with Captain Barber, he decided to take me to a horse show. He decided, okay, we're not going to do the gardens today. I'm going to a horse show. He loved horses. It was quite an experience, and he treated me to lunch. And in so doing, he rewarded me for my hard work. But more importantly, he allowed me to share in something he loved, to share in his life. He was very authentic. And now I knew what he loved and held dear. He loved horses. And I got to tell you, that was probably the roots of my obsession with the show Heartland. I've watched all 16 seasons, and I can't wait till Canada brings it to the U.S. for the season 17. The last is have fun. Now, back in the day, I worked for Captain Barber. I knew him as Captain Barber, but a lot of my friends did not know Captain Barber because they didn't work for him. But they did know him for the crazy Halloween guy. So every Halloween, Captain Barber would get a big chef's hat, and he would make up a big pot of organic popcorn. Okay? And so people would come up that unknowingly and knock on his door. He would open up with this big chef's hat and go, "No, don't knock on the door. Ring the bell. Crank the bell." So he would shut the door. You have to crank the bell, and they would come out with popcorn. Everybody's saying, "What's this, popcorn?" And he'd go 1 scoop or 2 scoops. And then he would dump the popcorn in your bag. Now, that was okay. The popcorn was delicious. But if you were unknowing, he had a little twinkle in his eye. And for people that were unknowing, he would go, "Do you want some butter with that?" And a few of my friends got butter ladled into their Halloween candy bag. I don't know if that was so funny for them, but it was kind of humorous. And one thing I was interesting, once I found out he was from Minnesota, that made sense. Because my in-laws are all from Minnesota, and they put butter on anything. I remember getting a peanut butter and butter sandwich, something, peanut butter and butter. But Captain Barber had fun on Halloween. He partaked in all our Halloween festivities in Crosswicks. So these are the 6 lessons that I learned from the amazing Captain Barber on wellness. He was the first organic farmer I knew, an octogenarian who climbed in trees, an honest business partner, and a mentor for life. But that's just a tiny sample. The young need to learn from the old, and an 11-year-old to earn money for his bike and lessons for life. Last night when I researched a bit more on Captain Barber, as I said, I found out he was born in Minnesota. And it makes sense now why I connected him with my father-in-law, Cal Hain. When you are close to earth, you are close to life and all that makes us human. Let us remember those mentors and our hometowns that painted our futures.